Hey everybody, Brandon here, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be playing the Dragon Sicilian. So I'm going to start with d6 here. d6 is totally fine. And we'll go g6. And again, we can play e6, but it's best to just wait until they play some sort of knight g5 to do so. Because if they don't and they play something a little off like this, then we don't have to worry. So, okay, they're giving us a interesting question here. They're asking, do you want to play e5? And they're doing something where positionally we could get this sort of pawn sacrifice line where after e5 and say bishop back to c1 or bishop to g3 or something, or even bishop g5, they're going to play c3, hoping that we take it. And the idea is that they have this weakened d5 square, and we've shut out our bishop. So I don't really think that's tempting to go for. Despite it kind of looking nice, it's really not the right call. So we're just going to play knight to f6 and continue things along a normal path. We'll take that for sure, and we will castle. No reason not to. So we're still up a pawn. They still have to find a way to give it up. Yeah, and they do it in an interesting way. So if we take, then they can take on d8, and then they win f7. This is not really something I'm looking forward to. Rather, let's just focus on development with knight to c6, where if they get the pawn back, they do have this isolated pawn. Yeah, and they shouldn't have taken immediately, because now I think we can cash out with queen takes d4. Queen takes d4, there is knight takes c6. Wow. They're on their game today. If I take like this, I do have to be careful of f7. So I would want to, on the next move, develop somehow, like bishop f5. Queen takes d4, knight takes c6. I could actually just take on f4 instead. I can just take on f4. So then I take on e7, and I just move out of the way. And that's not a big deal to me. It's all about finding those little nuances in your calculation, right? Yeah, so they hang this guy, which I think was a miscalculation. And if they take on c6, I could take on c6, but I like taking on the bishop more, even if they get this pawn out of it. Maybe I'm wrong. Giving up pawns is probably unnecessary. Yeah, we'll just take on c6. Just be up a piece. So yeah, they were trying really hard to do some calculation tricks, but it didn't end up working for them. They can try taking on c6 and then giving a check on d8 or anything. Yeah, but none of this really works out for them. So we always have moves like bishop e6, bishop f8 even. I'm quite a fan of. And bishop f8 looks a little strange, but the idea is whenever they give this check, all of a sudden, I can just move to g7. And there's not really any concerns. So I'm just going to play bishop f8 here. It's a good consolidating move in a lot of positions, actually. Now I just want to develop my light square bishop, preventing rook f3. They're hoping that if I play knight f3 instead, then they'd have some tricks, but nope. Okay, and now they take here, and my idea here was rook c8. So I'm giving up a little bit of material, but realistically, it's not enough for them. So I can follow up with something like rook c7 next. And the whole idea here is we need to just focus on getting our pieces out. Because if our pieces are just kind of stuck for forever, I can see that their initiative is quite dangerous still. It's not completely free and clear yet. We're getting there, but there's still a little bit of work to be done. And if we just, kind of ignored any of their threats just because we're up a piece, we could easily lose a piece and still have a worse position because their attack would still go on. And that's what we want to avoid. We want to make sure that we spend our time looking at the positions during these key moments. So I'm going to play rook c7 just to cover the 7th rank. This is really important for us. You might be thinking, hey, you're not spending lots of time. I kind of am, though, right? I'm just using their time. So, knight b4 looks good. I'm just trying to activate my pieces. If I can somehow get this rook to move, then I can take the rook behind it. But I like knight b4, starting with that. Looks effective. And I do have this move knight to d5, actually. Which is quite funny. And this forces a lot of exchanges, actually. Because I'm threatening the rook has to move somewhere. And then I can take on c3. So, yeah, knight to d5. And the problem is they can't take because I can take on c1 with check. And it'll end up mating after rook to e1, and we take on e1 as well. Very important here. Yeah, so they move back. I like taking on c3. And here, I'm just going to go e5. Get all of my pieces into the game. The last piece that's not really doing as much is the bishop. And now the bishop looks quite tasty. Because it's coming to c5. So queen a5 is probably... Okay, it wasn't played. I was thinking queen a5 just to attack the rook and try something. But that was not essayed by my opponent. So I'm just going to play bishop c5 here. Looking at f2. And I'm looking at like rook f7, knight e4. Just trying to like blow up on this f2 pawn, right? All of a sudden, because their attack's kind of over, they don't have many pieces left, which is one of the best ways to get rid of an attack, is just to try to exchange some pieces. And now what they're kind of left with is this unpleasant position where they're just down a piece. And it's not even just down a piece, right? We have 2 pieces for a rook. And then we also have an extra piece. So it's 3 pieces for a rook. Which is not good. And not something they want to see. So I like rook f7 here. Just really trying to go crazy on this square. Knight e4. And the problem is f3 is never possible because this bishop is actually pinning the pawn. Which is a great thing to mention. So if they try to attack my bishop in any way, I just go knight e4 anyways. Add the pressure. Because it does defend the bishop. So we don't need to consolidate for a move or anything like that. We just go all in. Okay. And now knight e4, they can play f3. But then we can play something like queen takes on h2. Or even, like, queen e3. No, queen e3. There's the rook there. My bad. Feels like there's something here. So knight e4 looks interesting. I can always just take on f3, actually. This works enough, yeah. f3, I just take on f3. That's more than enough. We're never scared of f3 here because we just have too many pieces. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces in the attack, and they have 1 defender of the f2 square. That's just too much. Even if we gave them an extra rook and just put it on a1, I think we'd just still be winning because of how much of a problem all of our threats are. We can give them 2 rooks too. Rook on a1 and b1. But I think it's just mating, so doesn't really matter. Okay. So they're thinking away. Yeah, and now we're just going to take on f3. I think this is the smartest decision we have. We're just threatening a bunch of discoveries, like bishop d1 check with mate. Actually, is that mate? There's rook f2, and then we take it with mate. Yeah, okay. I was looking for a mate in 1, but I think there's only mate in 2s here. Not a big deal. Yeah, so here we can just go bishop to d1. Or bishop to e2 if we're feeling nasty. But bishop d1 is the cleanest and most correct way to play this, because we can just take here. And we have discoveries. Yeah, so this doesn't quite work out. We can just take on e4, and we're threatening to go queen e1. And if they take on f2, we can just go queen e2 check, queen takes f2, and queen f1 with mate. So that's a mate in 3. Okay, and let's just retreat. I wish there was a way to retreat for it to be an immediate mate, but I don't see it. That's a shame. Yeah, they just have to go queen f2, unfortunately. I was looking for a way to, like, block the check, but I don't really see it. We'll just take here. And, I want to mate with the bishop somehow. Is that mean? Am I being mean, guys? If I just go check. And then check or something. Nah, it's not mean. I know there's a mate in 1 with queen g2 or queen e1, but... okay. Maybe that's good enough. I don't know. Okay, anyways, let's look at this a little bit further in depth. So we got our normal setup here, and our opponent tried this interesting idea of bishop f4, and they're trying to provoke e5. And e5, even though it does show up as one of the top moves at first, it kind of like whittles its way down. And the reason why is because if you play e5, as you can see, we lose just a slight amount of the edge. Bishop g3, what's going to happen is they're going to play this move c3, and they actually get a little bit of compensation. Maybe the rook e1 first to protect the pawn, castles, and then c3. And the huge problem here is we're going to have this weak d5 square. And we also blocked in our bishop, which is normally our strongest piece. We can totally get away with this. However, we have to know the consequences of having this weak d5 square. From what it looks like, we're not getting in d5 anytime soon, which would be the freeing break. And if we're not, then we have to really consider whether or not this is worth it. And to me, it feels like white is having all the fun. I would totally give up a pawn for this type of initiative. Maybe not in a classical game, but I can definitely see myself going for this. Just rapid or blitz online. So, yeah, going back here. That's why I played knight f6 instead. Because I'm just going for development, and I'm okay with not playing e5. And if they play something like c3 now, and I take it, well, all of a sudden, the one nice thing is that we didn't play this move e5, which is heavily in white's favor. Even if the evaluation still says there's compensation here, I would still rather have this type of position against white than the other one as seen before. So e5 was played instead. So knight h5 was quite strong, but I just went for the direct approach with d takes e5. Not trying to complicate things. I think complicating things too much is where a lot of players get into trouble. And if you can find some sort of position where you just feel comfortable and feel like you have a clean advantage through forcing means, then just do that, right? Don't overcomplicate things just because you think it's like slightly more accurate when both are just completely winning. Always go for simplification. So castles, c3, knight h5 was actually quite strong here, which I definitely should have considered. I was also thinking of knight d5 to attack the bishop on f4, which is showing up as well. But knight h5, I'm not sure why this didn't pop up. This is a very strong move. I ended up just going knight c6, which gave up some of the advantage. Mainly because one thing that they should have done is gone into this position. But my feeling here was that we have a pretty okay position. We both have an isolated pawn, but I feel like we have an easier time attacking theirs than they do of ours. We can play moves like bishop b7, and it's going to be harder to attack the c6 pawn, whereas our attack of the d4 pawn feels a bit more obvious with bringing the knight to b6 instead, playing moves like rook to d8. I always sneeze when I record. Okay, anyways, yeah, so that's kind of what my thought process was, but they took, and yeah, it's important to mention that after takes, we do not want to take on d1, as now they can take on e7 and take back on d1, and all of a sudden they are up material. And this is not something we want to allow. This knight's a little awkward, but yeah, white should be the one pressing there. Instead, after queen takes d4, knight takes, we can actually just take on f4. I think f4 is the better one to take of the two. Mainly because the bishop on f4 is the opposite of our fianchettoed bishop. So if we can get that off the board, then we have an unopposed fianchettoed dark square bishop, which is nice. As dragon players, we like that. Even if we have to play something like this. And yeah, I think we're totally fine here. If they take on c8, we can just take back. And yeah, I would take black any day. We can play moves like knight g4, try to provoke something over here. But not really the most important thing. The most important thing is that, well, we actually just have a phenomenal bishop, despite it being opposite color bishops. So bishop b3. We can just even jump in with knight e4. Knight g4 is actually popping up as the top move, which is cool. But even knight e4 makes sense, trying to prevent any easy development from our opponents, where we can just take on c3 here and go up a pawn. It is a dark squared. Oh, maybe we shouldn't take. Bishop takes instead. Okay, not important. We're getting too into the specifics here, but the whole point is that taking on f4 is just a bit nicer than taking on c4, because we get an unopposed bishop. Even if we end up in a dark square bishop position, that's not really so bad for us. So yeah, here, knight c3 was a huge blunder. We can take here as well. I think they were hoping that they had some sort of check, but they didn't. And yeah, things became much easier after this point. It is nice to note that bishop f8 is quite strong and does show up as one of the top moves. Again, just remember this type of defensive idea, especially now e7 is like our only weakness. Yeah, we'll move to the g7 square where our king will occupy instead of our bishop. And our king is actually a little bit safer on g7 as opposed to something like g8 with the bishop there, because we're always scared of some sort of back rank check. Whereas on g7, it's just never getting attacked ever, like period. So yeah, and yeah, things kind of followed up nicely. Felt like we got a good position. I liked knight b4. I liked knight d5. And forcing some exchanges when we're already up material is just a nice way to go. And as you can see here, yeah, queen a5 is top move. As I was talking about, that's what I was thinking about most in the game. But I was thinking of playing e4, I think, after queen a5. But yeah, again, whenever you consolidate after being up material and your opponent attacking you, then all you got to do is just find one weak point and just keep attacking it nonstop. And that's all we did. We just attacked the f2 square, and it was just too much. Where our opponent was just tied up, and because we had more material, we could just crash through anyways. And we dictate when we can crash through because we're just up the material. So that's another way to play. Instead of just trying to be always positional and always super slow, we can try to crash through at some point and even give back some material for some sort of like winning king and pawn ending. This is very, very common. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and that's about it. I will see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.